This episode of This Uncanny Earth is brought to you by Jack and V, the new sci-fi novella experience. Available on Amazon Kindle, May 5th.
There it is. There it is. Welcome, everyone, to episode 328, The Wide World of Exorcisms. I am your host, Robert Solomon, and your moderator for tonight. On my right is the one, the only, my other co-host, Spider. And did you get those links posted yet? Because you should be getting those links posted. Did you post those links? And
no, I'm getting fired.
The code hound himself, the intern, Steven. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight? We ready for a great show or what?
Yep.
We got this. It'll be a good one. It's the good cap to the trilogy that we've been doing.
Yes.
Yes. And it occurred to me, because we joked about it in our little preparatory group chat that we do on these shows, that, and I don't know if we told the people this, but when we were working on meditations, Steven, with all of his other big grand production ideas, he wanted us to do a group meditation on the air. We were kind of like, no, I don't know if people are going to go for that. But then, by extension, we would have had to do a seance for the next episode. And I don't think
which would have led to the exorcism.
We would have had to do some exercising, and obviously I don't do any exorcising or exercising of any kind. So let's just cut all that out.
And, don't do that again, please.
Okay.
I thought that was a fun thing to mention to all you folks out there who might want to see us do that, which we're not going to. So don't.
No, we don't. We don't need any entities following us home. Does anybody have any business they would like to put out there before we begin our show tonight?
If anybody's going to be locally in the area over the weekend, I will be at Open Mic Night in Canton at a place called The Fame, FAME. It's an acronym for something. I don't know what for. But I'm going to be doing a short 15-minute, which for me is probably only like 3 songs, set at open mic. So if anybody wanted to see me this year and you haven't yet and you're local, stop on by. There is a cost at the door, but it's supposed to be a fun place and you can do all kinds of things. And there's more than just the open mic. There's all kinds of activities. I guess it's a fun spot. So check my Facebook. I should have made a post about it somewhere over the last week or two. And otherwise, I can send you the details if you need it.
There you go. There you go. And I actually have something cool I'm doing tomorrow, but I can't tell y'all yet. It's not till July that I can really put that information out there. But it's going to be good. It's going to be fun. And yeah. So welcome to Exorcisms. Now, what is an exorcism? Now, an exorcism is a religious practice of evicting demons, jinn, or other malevolent entities from a person or an area that is believed to be possessed. This may be because the entity swore an oath, performed an elaborate ritual, or simply commanded it to depart in the name of a higher power. That's how the exorcisms usually work, not the entity. Sorry, I made that little faux pas there. Now, this is an ancient belief practice that is practiced by Christians, Muslims, those that practice Judaism, even all the way into some Hindu beliefs and some Chinese Tao beliefs. So I hope we're ready for that tonight. Gentlemen, what are your experiences with exorcisms? Not that you guys do exorcisms, but what are your experiences?
Who first?
Steve? No,
Okay.
All right.
Either
Well,
way.
I haven't personally ever been in a situation where I've witnessed one firsthand. My family isn't Catholic, which is the primary here in the United States. Catholicism is primarily where you find exorcisms more than other things. Um, I've seen variations of it on the various ghost hunting shows and things of that nature. Um, that some of them are iffy, some of them aren't. Um, but as far as well, we'll get into belief about it later, I suppose. But I haven't seen one in person. I've only seen them either dramatized or in movies or
Yeah.
on those various television shows.
All right, so me, I'm very much like Spider. Obviously, I've never seen one in real life. Most of my knowledge comes from, like pop culture, like supernatural and movies like, The Exorcist and The Exorcism of Emily Rose and stuff like that. And, I don't want to say too much about it because I'm sure you're probably going to get into it here in a minute. But Ed and Lorraine Warren is a popular one that gets into my head a lot.
Okay. And, that's the thing. A lot of people don't understand that exorcisms sometimes are just this big fanatical thing on TV, but a lot of times it's not really like that as much as it is more of like an intimate setting that people get into, and they sort of try to push the entity out of the individual or individuals that are being possessed. Now, let's start off with the most basic, and that's Christianity. And we're going to include Catholicism in this, but there is a distinct difference between the two. Now, in Christianity, it's just the exorcists themselves are thought to be graced with special powers and skills. Now, they may use prayers and religious materials such as symbols, sacred images, gestures, kind of like Catholics do, but a little bit different. And they invoke God, Jesus, or different angels, or even the archangel to exorcise the entities that are inside of the person. Now, in Protestant Christian exorcisms, the authority is given to them by the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that is their ability to cast out demons. Now, if we jump into Catholicism, it's a little more bureaucratic in that they perform based off the church allowing them to. The Catholic Church says, okay, you want to do an exorcism? What is the background? Do they have a medical condition? In the case of Annalise Michael, which I believe was more of a medical condition than anything else. So they have to get permission from the Holy See. They have to get permission from the Vatican to do these exorcisms. And there's minor and major exorcisms. Now, minor exorcisms are included in some blessings, which create sacramental objects like blessed salt. Now, a related aspect to these minor exorcisms is what's known as deliverance ministry. But the difference is that deliverance ministry is prayer for people who are distressed and wish to heal emotional wounds. These wounds could be caused by evil spirits. Now, an exorcism has to be conducted by priests who are in fact given special permission from the Catholic Church, as we stated previous and prior. Now, a major exorcism is given via Section 11 in the Ritual Romanium, and this ritual lists guidelines for conducting the exorcism, when an exorcism is required, and to who the exorcism is given. Priests must first determine if it is a psychological or physical illness, like we discussed prior, and the actual determination of whether a member of the faithful is genuinely possessed by the devil is made by the church. Now, that's a quote from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Now, the exorcist in Catholicism recites prayers from a rubric of rites, and they also use holy objects like water, icons, and other relics. They invoke God, Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, saints, and as previously discussed, the Archangel Michael. Now, several weekly exorcisms over many years are used to remove deeply entrenched demons. Now, gentlemen, let's go ahead and get ready for the conversation here. Stephen, what are your thoughts on the Catholic concept of exorcisms?
I think that's the one that is most often presented in movies, such as The Exorcist was actually based on a real, I don't know what the proper terminology is, but, you know, a real father, preacher. Do you know the proper terminology, what they're called in Catholicism?
Just priests.
Priest, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. But priest, you know, the priest in The Exorcist was actually based on a real person who has done like thousands and thousands of exorcisms. And my belief is that they believe that they have to do these exorcisms to battle against the evil of the devil trying to, you know, make more people do bad things and, you know, like condemn their souls to hell and all this. And two things I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that you mentioned was Annalise was actually the inspiration for Emily Rose. And there was one more thing right there near the end, but I forgot what it was. So we'll come back to that if I remember. Oh, did my audio mess up?
No,
I
I
can't.
think we can't hear you, Rob.
I
Oh,
can't hear
there
you.
it is. Sorry.
There you
sorry,
go.
sorry. There
Sorry.
it is. My bad.
I can't remember what the last thing I wanted to say was.
It's okay. Whenever you just
Yeah.
kind of let me know. Spider, different question for you. What do you think of the differences in between Protestant and Catholic exorcisms?
Well, it comes down to a lot of the philosophy and how they do everything else. Catholics, everything in Catholicism is bound by doing very particular things in very particular orders at very particular times. Not quite the same as where, like in Islam, you have the prayers at certain points every part of the day, but everything is very regulated. It's very by the rules. You have a set of relics or objects that you use for these things. You have a set of prayers that you use, and you're not supposed to deviate from any of that because it's supposed to be proven that this is what works. Uh, Protestant methods, on the other hand, are generally a little bit more free flow. Not necessarily that they make it up on the spot, but no two people will do it the same way necessarily. It's also based on the denominations because you've got Lutherans, Methodists, Baptists, Episcopalians. You've got so many. I can't even mention half of them. That's not even scratching the surface. And not all of those even do exorcisms, but the ones that do are going to be different from each other as much as they are different from Catholicism. And so you wonder, well, is there a difference in effectiveness? And I don't think anyone has done a real study on it because most studies of that sort are going to be done in-house, so to speak. If you're a Catholic doing a study from how the Catholics do it versus everybody else, you're obviously going to feel like, well, the Catholics do it better than everybody else, and ours is the right way. So we have to clean up everybody else's mess. Whereas the Protestants will come in and say, you know what, we don't care how they do it, we're doing it, and it works. So there's no real good way to compare them to see if either method is more effective or not. Which, considering that it's not a widespread thing that seems to happen as much these days, like you don't hear about it so much. You don't hear about, Sally down the street, her parents ordered an exorcism because she's flipping out. You don't. We're kind of past a lot of that stuff, considering how a lot of times in history we thought things. Oh, this requires an exorcism, where it's just mental health problems. You could just, have some therapy or something, but they didn't have that back then. It was either exorcisms or it was taken to the sanitarium.
Yeah.
And then do the lobotomy and whatever.
So do you think modern medicine has solved the exorcist problems?
To some extent. I don't want to dismiss it out of hand. As we've talked about often enough on the show, I always say I'm a pretty scientific guy, and I relegate most of that stuff to imbalances and mental things and energies and whatnot. But I cannot 100% say, as total fact that there aren't some sort of entities doing something to inhabit people's bodies in an incorporeal form. I can't say that because I don't know that. I lean towards the other way, and I think that's where most of society leans. But I also think because we've gotten away from it a little bit, in the cases where there may be legitimate issues and legitimate, like, there's some otherworldly thing really attacking these people, I think we tend to overlook it in favor of the scientific explanation. So we're kind of doing it a disservice. I think we probably should still study both sides of how it's done, regardless of what the statistics are.
Spider
Steven,
reminded me
you
what I
had a-
forgot.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. When Spider started talking about mental health, it reminded me. What I wanted to say was that possessions are actually ascribed as a mental health condition in the medical journal of mental health now. And in addition to that, to build on that, as he was saying, like, because it's the reason that it's in the mental health journal as possession is because, as he was saying, it relates to so many different, topics of mental health disorders, such as, DID and, schizophrenia and other disorders. Then is complicated because sometimes it can have overlap, like it can have multiple issues with this disorder or that disorder, so they can't really link it down to one single disorder. So I think it's interesting that it actually has been recognized by the medical journal as an official, mental health disorder, and still to this day it's heavily debated as to whether it's actually, something taking over the body or if it's completely mental. But they have said there are stories where some people have done crazy things during possession stories that to this day nobody can explain, and it was witnessed by medical professionals and police officers. There was this one story I heard about earlier today about this little 9-year-old kid, and he grabbed his grandmother's hand, walked up the wall backwards onto the ceiling, and then back down without ever letting go of her. And they say, obviously it's hard to fact check some of this stuff because a lot of people just say this stuff for money, obviously, but they did claim, medical professionals claim, that they were there, they witnessed this, and they have no medical explanation for how this little kid was able to do that.
So I think that right there is one of the instances where it sort of gets dicey when we start looking into things like that, where people see different things climbing the walls or different entities appear. I think at that point you have to sort of take away the scientific aspect of it and be like, okay, this is something that we have never seen before.
Yeah.
I've read different studies and cases where where they have had people climbing up walls. So that's an interesting point. That you bring up.
How do we explain that? Even if we can't explain that, we still have to acknowledge that we can't really explain it.
And I think that's important. But most people don't see that. Most people don't see the exorcisms every day. We don't have people that are there at the Exorcist Lounge like, okay, let's watch this little kid climb up a wall. You know what I mean? That's not something that actually happens. So what we have to do is we have to take that for what it's worth. And whether that's because they don't want that shown because it would scare the populace. I mean, if you saw a child climbing up the wall in your local news, you might be a little concerned. So there might be some other forces at play here that sort of keep that stuff kind of quiet. Yeah. Okay, so next up, we're going to be talking about a prayer to Michael for use in exorcisms. This is from a Catholic book. I'm going to read some of it, not all of it, because it's kind of long. So we're going to start with, "O glorious Archangel Saint Michael, Prince of the heavenly host, defend us in battle and in the struggle which is ours against the principalities and powers, against the rulers of this world of darkness, against spirits of evil in high places. Come to the aid of men whom God created immortal, made in his own image and likeness, and redeemed at a great price from the tyranny of the devil. Fight this day the battle of the Lord, together with the holy angels, as already thou hast fought the leader of the proud angels, Lucifer, and his apostate host, who were powerless to resist thee. Nor was there a place for them any longer in heaven, but that ancient serpent who was called the devil or Satan, who seduces the whole world, was cast into the abyss with all his angels. Behold, this prime evil enemy and slayer of man has taken courage. Transformed into an angel of light, he wanders about with all the multitude of wicked spirits, invading the earth in order to blot out the name of God and of his Christ, to seize upon, slay, and cast into eternal perdition souls destined for the crown of eternal glory. ... Because it continues for at least, like, I think 3 or 4 more paragraphs. It's a rather long paragraph.
So he
Um,
protects people and destroys evil.
Catholics.
Yes. Now, my question, we'll start with Spider. Why do you think this stuff is so long? Why do you think there's so much that they have to do to take out these evil entities when, in the Protestant version, it's like, we have the power, we command you to leave. But with Catholicism, it seems like there's so much more to it to root out this evil. What do you think the reason for that is?
The longer, the more words that you use, and I don't mean necessarily just throwing a bunch of random words and phrases in there just for fun. Like, oh, we will use the McDonald's and the power of Big Macs, and down the street at 2nd and 3rd, we will do blah, blah, and just throw stuff in there. It's the more that you put into there,
The more powerful it is.
that's deemed to be holy or deemed to be specific for the use, the more weight you add to it. You almost can get into a lengthy mantra, a lengthy kind of chant sort of thing. And that's how most Catholic things are. If you've ever been to a Catholic wedding, you're sitting there for a long time, because and it's not just like prayers, and it's not passages, it's long statements that have to be made.
Yes.
That aren't just them making up stuff that they wrote. Like, the preacher's not gonna the priest isn't gonna stand up there, oh, I wrote all these notes the night before, I'm gonna talk about this wedding and how great it is for 3 hours. It's these are the things that have been written for him by the Catholic Church as a whole, voted on in some conference hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
And it has to be said over this length of time, because it's important that you get it all in there, because every word is necessary. And part of it is related to the old school practice of when the Catholicism was coming in to try to push out the pagans and to push out the old religions. They knew that words had power. They knew that words had power because that's how things worked. And if you go by biblical statements, then the word has power, because the word was with God, quote unquote.
God
So
loves the word.
the more you put in there, the more you tell people you got to pay attention, because listen to how much of this there is. This is all important. You got to do it. Part of it is also a little bit on the BS side, because Catholicism used to do it all in Latin.
Yeah.
When people couldn't understand Latin. So the more that they spoke, you'd have to sit there thinking, oh, he's saying an awful lot of stuff. That's all really important. I don't understand a word of it, but I better pay attention, because if I don't know this, I'm going to be problematic, and oh no. So they carried that over after a sense. There's a lot of different facets to it. And so the more that you lengthen it out, the more you add to it, the more weight it has. And it almost, I would say it's almost like a crushing boredom at some points. Not to be insulting to Catholics. I don't want people to be like, you just called everything we do boredom. I'm not a Catholic, and I can't sit there listening to that for that long, regardless of how
gotta bore the
important it is,
demon out of the body.
It can't sit in my brain that long. But that's partially the point. The believers are going to hang on every word. They're going to let all of that keep on rolling over them, the sheer weight of it. Whereas the people who don't have the faith are just going to be like, yeah, whatever. And you can be able to tell, like, these people don't have the faith. So it's a faith issue as well. You have to have faith that all parts of that are important. And that'll be a point that I'll make later regarding the faith of the exorciser and calling upon certain deities and things. Because as we'll get into other cultures, you deal with different cultures' views of what a demon or an entity or a spirit is, and you have to wonder, are they going to even recognize this religious aspect? I'm going to get into that later because I know we're going to get into it. So, but this plays into that. This is a part of that whole thing.
Stephen, talking about these prayers that are very long-winded. I was almost going to take the Latin one and try to read the Latin one, but we probably would have summoned something.
I'll try
or
if
We
you
might have
want.
been
exercise
here
something.
the rest of the night. Just
We've been
listening.
here
I'll
the
try
rest
it.
of the night. No, I'm the Latin one here, not you, Stephen.
Aw.
You're the intern, not the Latin intern. You're the intern. No, if we go into it a little bit further, and we read these prayers, do you think the sounds and the vibrations coming from the person, the energy that is said in these prayers, do you think that is more important than the prayer itself?
I think more important than the prayer itself, or even the vibrations, like maybe the way that you speak it, because different people have different voices and their vibrations are going to be different because they have different pitches in their voices. So I feel like that would be something that would be very hard for someone to control consciously, So I'm thinking it's more about the intention than anything else. Like, it doesn't matter what you say so much as you believe that what you're saying is important. Like, if you can say all this stuff, but if you don't believe that it's going to have an effect, then it won't. And at the same time, you can say, I'm a Willy Wonka muncher, and it doesn't matter what you say so long as you believe that it will help.
Okay.
Is what I'm trying to say.
So you think it's a mind over matter type of thing?
Exactly. I think it's more like the law of attraction almost, but in religious terms. It's more about your faith and your belief that your God will protect you than it is that what you're saying is even relevant or important.
Okay. Very good points from both gentlemen. Let's move on into Hinduism. Now, Hinduism is going to be a little bit different because we're going to start reaching into cultures that are very different from the Christian Catholic viewpoints, maybe except for Judaism and Islam, but we're going to reach all the way into Hinduism. Now, in Hindu traditions, people can be possessed by bhutas, pretas, and pashchas. These are words, all right? Now, these are restless and malignant beings, close almost in similarity to ghosts or even demons. The Atharva, nope.
Uh-oh.
The Atharva Veda is the key of the 4 Vedas to focus on the knowledge of exorcisms, alchemy, there you go, Stephen, magic, and just that sort of religious rituals. Now, the mantra, which is a sacred utterance of phrases that connect to a god or a goddess, and the yajna is a sacrificial offering or a ritual done before a sacred fire. Remember, fire is going to be an important aspect in the things that we talk about in exorcisms or just in religion as a whole. Fire is always going to be a sacred thing. This is what purifies the different beings or the different people that follow said beliefs. Now, in the dominant sect of Vaishnava, which places Vishnu as the supreme being, exorcisms are done by reciting the names of Narasimha, who is an avatar of Vishnu that seeks to purge the world of evil and restore Dharma. Now, readings from the Bhagavata Purana, which is a text that tells of good vanquishing evil, may also aid in this exorcism. Now, the Gurada Purana is a vast corpus of literature that centers on Vishnu and deals with topics related to death, disease, good versus evil, and even spiritual health. A devotional hymn known as the Hanuman Chalisa says to conduct exorcisms by praying to Lord Hanuman, who is a devoted follower of Rama. Now, according to the Chaupai, which is like a clip or a part of this, him just uttering his name terrifies evil spirits into leaving the possessed. And in many Hindu temples, a picture of Lord Hanuman is up on the pillars and walls, and just looking at it alone is enough to drive evil spirits out of the person. Now, as we can see, Hinduism differs vastly from the Abrahamic faiths. The concept of there's many gods in Hinduism. There's many gods. We have to understand this.
Thousands.
So we have this one dominant sect where Vishnu, and I believe that's the elephant, the one that looks like the elephant, if I'm not mistaken. What are your thoughts? We'll start with Stephen first. What are your thoughts on how Hindus handle exorcisms as opposed to Catholics and Protestants?
It sounds incredibly different and complicated. And to be completely honest, I don't really understand it.
Fair enough.
But
fair enough.
I do like the fact that Hanuman is associated with it, because I don't know much about him, but I am under the impression that he's like a monkey god, correct?
That I was not sure of, because
Okay,
I was trying to pull a bunch of different information today.
Not trying to be offensive. Not trying to be offensive, but I was under the impression that he was actually the Hindu cultural variation of Sun Wukong, and some people believe that he was actually part of the original inspiration for Sun Wukong.
He is the monkey god, by the way.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I've heard some people say that he was part of the inspiration behind Sun Wukong, so that's why that stood out to me.
And no, James, we did not. Interestingly enough, we did not. Spider, your take on Hinduism and exorcisms, how do you think they differ from our Western interpretations of exorcisms?
It's different from a cultural perspective in what the practice is, but it's similar in complexity.
Okay.
You still have to follow specific rules. You have
Yes.
to do specific things. You have to be very, very particular in how you present and how you say and how you approach it. You can't just walk and be like, you know what? I got the fire and the faith. You demons, get out of here. You can't do that. For whatever reason. And in a society that's as old as those in India, where Hinduism came from, a lot of this has reinforced itself over hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And it's also interesting to me, and this is where I'm going to make the point that I was going to make a minute ago, because it fits here. If you had a Catholic priest and they go to India and they come across, oh, there's spirits in this man's body, do you think you can help? That's where that's where faith comes in, I think. Because if you're a person that's a very faithful person, it won't matter as much what you're saying. It'll matter the intent that you're saying it with, because it's unlikely that the spirit in India will possibly have ever been to any place where it might have ever heard of any of the Catholic saints or any of the deities that the Catholics know of. And you can say, well, that's because if you're Catholic, there's only one God, there's only one set of angels, there's only one set of whatever, and it doesn't matter if they know about him or not, there's only one. But you go there and they're going to say kind of similar things. Hinduism is, of course, a little bit more broad. Like I said, they've got thousands of gods. They have been known when other religions have come through, if they're feeling accepting, which they don't always. There have been stories of Hindus being like, no, we don't like that, and we're going to murder you for it. But for the most part, they'll bring in other deities, be like, oh, yeah, that's just another aspect of so-and-so. Or, oh, hey, you can come in. Yeah, why not? We'll just add that one. And it's not a really big deal for them. So
I like that.
But it's almost the same kind of thing where if you have somebody from India and they're in New York City and they come across, oh, there's a spirit in here, get the diocese. No, they're not available. Can you do this? Can you call upon your own angels or whoever? And he goes through the process that a Hindu would. Then you have to wonder, well, is the entity on the other end going to recognize any of that, or going to believe that that's powerful at all? Are they going to respect it? And it comes down to, again, the weight of the faith of the person more than anything else, because that's the intent. And that's why a lot of times in Catholicism, they dramatized it in the movies. They say, I need a young priest and an old priest. But that's so that the younger can see the weight of the faith of the older and learn to train the next one. It's based off of how they actually do things. They'll do things in pairs often for that, so that you can pass that faith along. Not just this is how you do it. You have to be in the room to feel the energy moving. So I don't see it as, to circle back around to the original question, I don't see it as that different from Western traditions. Just the styling and just the lens that you filtered it through, the overall idea is the same. You follow certain rites, certain practices, and certain rituals in a specific way that you've been taught without deviation, because if you go outside the lines, then it's either not going to work or you're going to make the situation worse.
Go ahead, Steven.
Spider actually got me thinking about something. When he mentioned that, it's interesting that in different cultures they have, different names for their holy people and, their angels, deities, whatever. And it's interesting that they use different names in different cultures. And he was asking if this spirit, demon, whatever, would know what name you were using. Like he said in his example, if you're in New York and, you have a Indian using Hindu names, are they going to know that? And that got me wondering, do we believe, if we are to believe in the afterlife and the spirit world in the first place, are we to believe that all information is universal and they shared that information through each other? Or do they have to communicate like us, because they're a different waveform, they're at a different frequency? So I've always wondered, like, do they just instantly know everything, or do they have access to all the information? Like, how do you guys think that would work with the information like that?
I think, this is where I think I differ with you two on this one. I think spiritually, I think the gods and the goddesses, if they exist, I'm not here to say they do and they don't. I have my own personal beliefs, but I think they already know. I think they all know each other.
Yeah.
Because if we look in, hold on, Second Kings?
Multiple
Second Kings or
examples across
Second
different
Chronicles,
religions.
because those are both pretty much the same books. They tell the similar story. There is referred to as Elohim in the uppercase, which is God, and there's referred to Elohim as in the lowercase, which are the lowercase gods. No, these are lowercase Elohim. Okay. So for me, I think that everybody knows each other if this is the case. Now, is that something I could prove? Probably not. No, I can't, obviously. But I think they all know. So I think when Spider said, the intention, it's intent that's what matters. If we really look at it like that, is intent. So if you have the intent of driving something out, I don't think that it's going to matter too much what religious sect you are, because you're driving out an evil spirit, an evil entity. So I think there's some cross relationships. If I don't believe that necessarily personally, but I think if I were to put sort of a spiritual aspect upon this, that's the take that I would probably have.
That's a very good way of putting it, as James said, a big G versus a little g.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, anything else?
That was all I had.
Okay. So let's march into Islam here. Now, Islam is very similar to its Christian counterpart of the Abrahamic faith. And in Islam, exorcism actually practices include Tard al-Shaitan / al-Jinn, which is the expulsion of the demon or the spirit, Ilaj, which is treatment, and Ibra al-Masru, which is curing the possessed. There's also something known as Ruqya, which is enchantment or cleansing, and it's used to exorcise various spirits. Now, the Prophet Muhammad taught his followers to read the last 3 surahs from the Quran: Surat al-Ikhlas, which is the fidelity, Surat al-Falaq, which is the dawn, and Surat an-Nas, which is mankind. Now, during an exorcism in Islam, a sheikh places a hand on the patient's head and recites verses from the Quran. This isn't always practiced, but sometimes it is, and it's not mandatory. This is just something that might be done depending. Drink drinking, not drinkling. That's not even a word. Drinking
what
or
I'm doing over here.
sprinkling. Yeah, I'm the one who should be drinkling. Drinking or sprinkling of holy water and applying non-based perfumes known as attar mirror a lot of the Catholic rituals that are done. Now, the process of using Quranic healing during exorcisms are used in 3 stages. The first being removing any haram, which is bad. We'll just say bad. Distractions such as musical instruments, amulets, and golden jewelry, and all pictures in the room that would allow angels to enter are removed. The exorcist then tells the family that he is merely a mediator and everything that happens is God's will. Sort of like, hey, if I make a mistake, I'm covered.
Not my
type
fault.
of thing. Right. And that cat's not covered. The healer determines if the client is possessed and so begins a dialogue with the spirit. The healer may ask about the type it is, whether it be a zar, which is a red wind, an arwah, which is a ghost, a jinn, which is, of course, a genie, a shaitan, which is a devil, or a div, which is a demon, and the reason why the person is being possessed. He then asks the client about dreams and feelings involved in said dream. After the healer cleans himself, the room, and asks people in the room to do the same. Then the exorcism begins by reciting Quranic verses such as Al-Fatiha, Al-Baqarah, specifically Al-Baqarah 225, which I read Al-Baqarah today. It's about 40 some odd pages. And I have a Quran that has both the Arabic and the English. So one side's Arabic, the other side is English. And then they also read an Al-Jinn and the 3 Kul, which are Al-Hiklas, Al-Nas, and Al-Falak. And it's all dependent on the type of spirit. Now, other treatments, which I found to be kind of interesting and very mirroring of ancient Mesopotamian culture, was the use of honey and water as purification rituals to clean the soul and body from sins. Once again, honey playing a very important part in our historical aspects, both in Mesopotamia and in Egypt and in Islam. So you have to wonder if there's something to honey, and maybe at some point there will be. So I'll start because I see Spider's raring to go. He's pushing his glasses like, well, let me tell you guys a little something. See? You got something? Yeah, I got my nerd muscles going on. I'm about to flex. Spider, what are your thoughts? Because I know you're coming in hot.
The first part, to answer a little bit of the wondering about the honey is, especially in that part of the world, honey is a natural preservative. It essentially can last forever. If it's pure honey, it doesn't go bad. It doesn't mold. It can. I've seen honey that I bought at the grocery store get stuff on it, and you can get botulism from it. But that's because it's not pure honey. It might be partially diluted, or different things. But pure honey has always been it's imagery for purity, for being something that cannot be, as long as you don't dilute it, it's always going to be good. It's always going to be what it is.
Major component of alchemy.
It's a symbol for how you're supposed to keep the soul. The soul is supposed to be like honey. And so the use of it, especially in that part of the world, because the Middle East has known this for a very long time. You get references to milk and honey from way back in ancient Samaria as trade goods, or as just, these are things these are good things, these are pure things. And in the Garden of Eden, in some translations, they've mentioned that there were rivers of milk and honey. And when Marco Polo went to China, and when he went through Mongolia, and he went through different places, and he met the assassins on the top of the mountain, they said, oh yeah, one of the things we're promised is when we take the hashish, we're taken to a garden with rivers of milk and honey. It's a recurring theme, because these are things that are pure. These are things that are good. And so the idea is, if you're going to be pushing out something that is not pure, that's not good, that's acting out, you bring something that it's not going to like, or that might help it change its disposition. The the other interesting thing about it is that Islam and Judaism and Christianity are very tightly related. They look completely different from somebody who's never really
And
known much about
Zoroastrianism.
them, and Zoroastrianism, and a couple of others.
Mhm.
There's like 5 total that all are basically the same religion at the base of it, that spread in different times and
Yeah.
through different ideas, and then were slowly changed to adapt to where they were needed to be at whatever they were. And so it's not too surprising that they would follow a similar practice despite being a different cultural outlook. The other thing is, I can imagine that some of the passages that they're supposed to read are specifically passages that reinforce the authority of Allah,
Yes.
because that's another similar thing that you see in Western exorcisms. A lot of the verses that you read, they deal with the authority of the higher power, because the idea and the thought is that perhaps this spirit may not necessarily be malicious, but they might be they're breaking the rules a little bit. They're bending the rules. You need to remind them who's in charge. You have to remind them, because they're acting out, because they'll do what they want to do. And only the really truly evil ones are going to need the whole board of everything to be like, yeah, you better get out, because you're going to get punished. You're not
Right.
escaping it. There's no escape for it for you, and you're making it worse. Get out of this person, or you're done for. So I would be willing to bet that those passages are very much tailored for that, because that's another specific aspect of Islam. It's the repeated idea of the authority of Allah. That's why they don't keep portraits of their saints. Well, not their saints, but their prophets and their holy
Prophets.
people.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to give anyone else any authority that could come close to Allah's. Allah's is the ultimate, and anyone stepping on that is committing some of the worst kind of sin. So that's a common theme that they do. Whereas in the Western, it's very carrot and stick. It's very, our God is a vengeful God, but he's also a loving God. So he's going to punish you if you do bad things, but you know what? He's going to forgive you for it. You just got to be there for the forgiveness. Catholicism is the harshest of some of that, but it's still a give and take. Whereas in Islam, it's like, nah, you better be good. You better be good, because there's no alternative. If you're not good, you're done for. And you're not getting any paradise. You're not getting anything after you die. You're lake of fire all the time, forever, done. Boom.
Yeah. Holla at your boy.
And if you're bad now, while you're alive, we'll help you get there.
Yeah, we'll usher your way.
We'll
in
help you get there faster if that's what you want.
We'll expedite your process.
So again, that's part of the process, and that they very much want to invoke the authority for both the spirit and to remind the people watching from the outside that you better be good, because if you're not, this could happen, and we're going to have to do this.
Yeah. And that's really what it is too. As I was reading through, it's known as the Cow. It's the second book of the Quran, and I was reading through it, and it's very much like, that's it. There's no, you can't go here, and don't go here, because you're going to pay for it. Stephen, I pose you this question. In both Catholicism, Islam, sacred text reading seems to be the way to push out the entities. And then we look at Hinduism, and it's the same thing. Why do you think they need that sacred wisdom or that sacred text to push the demon out, instead of relying on their faith to push those demons out? Do you think that there is power in these words, or do you think it's just, if they just had faith with words? So if they said, get out, demon, but they had the faith behind it, do you think that could push it out? Or do you think there is power in these words that are aligned in a way that are able to push demons and entities, ghosts, and things like that out of the way?
I think it's more like you said, with there being power in the words, but there's also power in the faith, because like your example, just get out, demon, that wouldn't
Right.
work. That's just
Right.
silly, and I think it's very important that it's not just get out, demon, or something so simple. I think the reason the words work is less because, well, it's like you said, I do agree that it's because these particular words are aligned in a certain way, but I think it's less about the exact wording and more that the words are symbolic and encoded rather than just flat out commands. I think that is a major differential, is that the words have to be symbolic and encoded rather than just flat out commands. And I think that is one of the biggest things that makes them work versus not working, because it's like a magic spell. When you see magic, if you go to a magic show and he makes the lady disappear in the crowd, he doesn't say, "Lady, disappear in the crowd." He gives some sort of magic spell, and gives some fancy words. And I think it's kind of similar to that.
Okay, excellent. I agree. I think there's power in the words that they're used to drive the demons out. But we'll get into a question I have about that later. Let's run into Judaism. Now, the historian Josephus reports that exorcisms were performed by administering poisonous root extracts, and some others were made by making sacrifices. I wonder how many people died from those poisonous root extracts.
Thousands.
Now, Rabbi Yehuda Fataya authored the book Minchat Yehuda, which is a book that deals with exorcisms. And in his experiences with possessed people and other Jewish thought, he wrote all this out in Hebrew, but it was translated later on into English. Now, the Jewish exorcism ritual is a little bit different than the others, but it's still kind of the same thing. It's performed by a rabbi who's mastered the Kabbalah, and present are a group of 10 adult males known as a minyan. The minyans circle around the possessed person and they recite Psalm 91 3 times. Then the rabbi blows a shofar, which is a ram's horn. Now, for those of you that are curious, like I was, the walls of Jericho were taken down with the very same horn.
In
It's
the Bible,
important.
right?
Yes. The shofar is blown in such a way with various notes to shatter the body so that the possession will be shaken loose. After it's shaken loose, the rabbi begins to communicate with the spirit and asks it questions such as why it is possessing the body. Now, the minyan may pray for the spirit and perform a ceremony so that it feels safe and can leave the person's body. Now, what we are seeing here with Judaism, as opposed to Catholicism or Christianity, is that the spirit isn't necessarily malevolent. It's just a wayward spirit that has wandered inside of a human because, as we see, they are performing ceremonies and praying for it in a way that it can feel safe to leave the person's body, as to where in Catholicism, when it's a demon, it's being forcibly removed. You don't have a choice. Get out. There's no safety here for you. Get to stepping. You're one of the adversary's children. But in Judaism, it just seems to be a wayward spirit, almost like a Dubyuk. So, Stephen, you look like you're antsing in your
Yes.
pantsing to say something. So we'll
Yes.
go ahead and we'll open the floor to you. What do you have to say?
Okay, when you started talking about the ram's horn and breaking down the walls of Jericho, that being one of the ways that they, might be able to get a demon out of the body, that actually reminded me when I had my kidney stones a few years ago, they used sound waves to break it down so that it could get out of my body. And that was very interesting to me because it's like my kidney stone was symbolic of a demon invading my body without my permission.
Spider, thoughts?
It is an interesting bit of continuity between an old biblical practice and modern things. And you see a lot of instances where in Judaism, their medical practices and their scientific practices are inexplicably tied to their religious and spiritual practice. They're the same thing. Frequently, when you have a Jewish scientist, they're not just a scientific fact person.
Right.
They're a Jewish person, which is tied into who they are. That their religion is who they are from start to finish. And so it's not particularly surprising to see. It's fun when you get a connection like that. Like super like, oh, that's some good stuff.
I had to look it up. I was like, chauffeur. I wonder if that's the same thing they used to bring
as soon as you said what it was
down.
called, I was like, and then when you said it, I was like, yeah, that's what it is. Because
I love that.
Because that's how they view things. Everything that the Jewish outlook is not properly understood, I think, a lot, because it is an ancient outlook. And they don't see spirits as inherently evil. They don't see there really aren't demons. Demons as a term came to be when the Greeks came later, and even then it wasn't necessarily evil. It was just a word that they used for certain class of spirits. For Judaism, spirits are they're in the same sort of umbrella as what we would consider angels and other followers of Yahweh, but they're not as close. They're a few spots removed, not quite as removed as humanity is, but they're a few spots down the totem pole. And so they tend to want to get away with things more. They tend to want to explore and wander. And when they possess somebody, it's not always because they wanted to possess them. It's sometimes because they got close to a person and they got trapped. And because they're trapped, they're acting out and they're making the person act out. And that's why you have to blow the horn to partially break down the body to give them an out. And then you have to convince them, you know what, you can go, it's okay. You don't need to be in here. You're causing trouble, okay? You best got to move on. And you don't often hear with Jewish exorcisms the level of malice and malevolence that you get with some of the Catholic stories. You don't think back and see if you remember any movie in your lifetime that features a Jewish exorcism on the same level as that.
Not at all.
There really aren't any.
There might be one or two that I can't.
They might be really obscure. But you would think if it was like a big thing that Hollywood could take and be like, yeah, that's a big story, they'd have done it a lot. And they don't, because it wasn't a big thing. Because the Jewish people didn't make a big deal out of it, because it was something that, unfortunately, it happens. They're more connected to the spiritual world, so the spirits tend to rub elbows with them and tend to do things they're not supposed to, whether they want to or not. And so it's the least invasive, I guess, compared to the other two, and it's the least forceful. You're not doing quite as much forceful, get out, I'm pushing you out, all the authority of the heavens is bearing down on you to get out of this person. It's more like, we need you to go, you're not supposed to be in here, you got to get out. And it's not nearly as violent. However, because they're from an older society and they still have some of those pre-Abrahamic roots in old school paganism and things, that's where you get the poisonous things and whatever, because the thought is, oh, well, you put them into the body, then it'll make the body unpalatable, so the spirit will leave. And it's a risk, but we know it's a risk. It'll be okay if the spirit leaves quick. We can get it out. We can get you feeling better. But if they don't leave quick, well, it's just the cost of doing business. So it is a little bit harsher on that respect too. And that's not something that happens as often modern, I don't think. I think that was more in the older days. But you're going to find Orthodox groups that'll probably still be like, yeah, take this bitter stuff. This will help. You'll start puking. You'll puke, and the spirit will come out. And hope nothing else bad happens to you.
Very much like the Mesopotamian concept of driving out spirits with the cold compress and, getting that spirit out by any means necessary. Very similar in
you affect roots. The body, it affects the spirit.
Yeah.
It's not purely spiritual warfare, which is the concept of the Western thought about how it's pure spiritual, whereas in the older cultures, especially in that part of the world, it's as much physical as it's an issue of the flesh as it is an issue of the soul.
Right. Now we're going to go into Taoism and Chinese concepts. So exorcisms are actually performed for two reasons. The first being that the individual has disturbed a ghost, regardless of how they did it. Maybe they walked over the grave, maybe they kicked over something, and that ghost wants revenge, and it's coming for you. The second is that the person itself is targeted by black magic to conjure a ghost to possess them. So Steven's mad at Spider because he didn't give him $5 out of his wallet, so he sends a black magic ghost after him. Now, the Fashi are Chinese ritual experts and Taoist priests who are able to conduct the exorcisms. They're the only ones. And different sects have different ways of conducting rituals. As an example, the Tanki are leaders of exorcist rituals that involve divine powers from Shen or deities to conduct a dramatic performance to call out against the demons so the village can have a little bit of peace. Now, the leaders strike themselves with various sharp weapons to show their invincibility and to let out their blood. Once again, blood is going to play a key factor in this one. Now, the form of blood is said to be sacred and powerful, so much so that after the actual rituals, the blood is blotted with talismans and placed on the door of houses to act as spiritual protection against evil spirits. Now, where do we see the concept of blood being placed on the door of houses to act as spiritual protection against evil spirits?
The Bible.
The Bible, yes.
Passover.
We see Passover, yes, because the entities passed over the house for the house that didn't have the blood on them. Now, not all sects partake in ritual blood use. And in fact, the Lushan are more into blood rituals, but the Quan Shen are more monastic by nature and do not utilize blood for their exorcisms. Now, all Taoist exorcisms use fulu, and fulu are changing physical gestures, much like mudras and praying, to drive away the evil spirits. Yes, kind of like that almost. Different symbols and things of that nature. Now, let's start off with Steven because he's making gang signs in there. We don't want to get shot. Why do you think blood is so important?
Because it, once again, major component of alchemy. I think blood is very important because it represents the life force and the life energy. So all of your wishes, goals, desires is ingrained within your blood. And blood magic, if you believe in magic, is one of the most powerful forms of magic that there is. Blood rituals are incredibly powerful because you're making a sacrifice and you're putting part of yourself within the spell, and that makes it that much more powerful.
Okay. Now, Spider, your thoughts on the whole concept of Taoist beliefs and their forms of exorcism? Some use blood, some don't. What do you think is the concept of how they do exorcisms as opposed to the West or Hinduism even?
Eastern thought of spirituality is it's different in that there is no single way to deal with everything. There's several different classifications and different types of demons and different kinds of spirits, and some of them can be bargained with, some of them can't. Some of them are murder machines, some of them aren't. Some of them want to see you and your entire family and all your generations laid to waste completely, and some of them just want to irritate you for the rest of your life because you stepped in a grove you weren't supposed to. So the methods of dealing with them are a little bit varied. They're similar because you still have to have like a standards and practice kind of thing. You don't want just everybody doing whatever. But because then people get the idea that, oh, I can cast them out. Oh, I could cast them out. Oh, sure, so can I. I'm going to drink a bunch of sake and just, hey.
That's a thing.
But what's interesting about it is, of course, you do have the idea of the blood, as Stephen had mentioned, of being like a life force, because we know even as far back as primitive man that they discovered pretty quick that blood was nourishing. Blood from kills and things were it it made you feel stronger, it made you feel better. They would sometimes preserve the blood from their catches and use it for different things, for ritual things or just in feasts. And some older cultures still do that. You still find that in a lot of cultures that were once pagan or barbarian cultures. You find that especially in Scotland. They have blood pudding. They have black pudding, which is sausage made out of congealed blood. It's a common thing. They eat it for breakfast. You know, I don't think they think about it in, oh, I better have my blood today because it'll give me the power to get through the day. It's just something that's part of their culture now. But it grew out of that idea that you didn't waste it because it was necessary. And as time went on, you started getting stories of evil spirits that would eventually become the vampire legends, that they would take your blood because that's what made them live. And if you lost all of it, you would die. If you don't have your blood, then you die. Obviously, it's life force because it's keeping you alive. You need your blood. So it's a little bit of common sense, but a little bit of also like mystical, ooh, ah, kind of thing about it. And so it's natural to assume over time that became, there's obviously power in the blood. Blood means something. It's a symbol. If you don't have it, obviously you're dead. If you do have a lot of it, then you're vivacious, you're strong, you're powerful, so you can use it for things. And I don't find that too surprising. It's a strange issue these days with the medical knowledge that we have about bloodborne pathogens and various other things now, because there's more of those now than there used to be, especially with, you know, the HIV epidemic that's still very much a thing. And other things that you can transmit now, but not all cultures have quite caught up to that, or are quite like, you know what, well, if we do things with it, if we purify it, if we warm it up, or if we do different things, then that's not going to be an issue. We can still use it for what we're doing. So it's fallen out of favor for that, but the symbolism is very much still here. And I don't find that particularly surprising that they would use that in their rituals. It's more surprising to me that they might not, but that it is probably more due to the influence of Western schools of thought on some of that, and more the incorporeal spirits versus the physical of the spirit.
Okay. Excellent. Great points. Great stuff tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, for your input tonight on exorcisms. We are getting ready to close the show out. This concludes our 3-episode arc revolving around meditation, seances, and exorcisms. I want to thank everybody who joined us for these past 3 weeks. We've had a great time talking about it. Coming up on July 3rd, we will have the Manhattan Project. Our very own Spider will be leading the foray into that one. On July 10th, we will have Stephen giving us some nuclear disasters. So, Stephen, don't do anything nuclear.
I think that's backwards. I think
is that flipped?
Stephen was supposed to
It
be.
is.
Stephen, is it you?
Steven's gonna do Manhattan
okay.
Project, and I've got the
Okay.
disasters.
Okay, so let's rewind that one.
Yeah.
So
Try
on
again.
July 3rd, Stephen will be talking about the Manhattan Project. On July 10th, we will have our very own Spider talking about all the nuclear disasters that he's created. And on July 17th, I will be taking you on a tour through India and Pakistan and their rivalry. And it's not one that many people know about. So we're going to jump headlong into that. As for myself, as for my co-hosts, I hope you all have a wonderful day and a beautiful evening. And as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? Thank you to James for commenting, and we will see you folks next week for an all-new episode of This Uncanny Earth.